Nature's wealth, good for your health. This is the Raw Life Health Show.
Everybody, this is Paul Neeson. I'm going to do something different right now. I've been talking about how to heal inflammatory bowel disease or just deal with it. And in dealing with it, not everyone's ready to do it the way I did it and do it naturally. And some people want to go the medical route. And I have a good friend who, when I was growing up, he called me and he got diagnosed with inflammatory bowel disease. And at that time, I don't think he knew I had it. And when I told him I had it, he was interested to know what I did. And I told him. And ultimately, he's going to discuss that, but he ultimately decided to go the medical route. Now, I tell people, if you're not ready to do it this way and you go the medical route, he's been very successful. He's done it, and it's like 15 years later, and he's still doing fine. So I want him to discuss this so people know the options, and I just want to ask him a couple of questions. And so his name's Jonathan, and Jonathan, say hello to the audience.
Hello, everyone.
So Jonathan, how many years ago now is it when you got diagnosed, and was it Crohn's or colitis?
It was ulcerative colitis that I had, and I think I was diagnosed around 1998, and then I ended up having surgery, I believe it was in 1999 and 2000, because I had to have two different surgeries.
Now, right away, I do want to say is what they told Jonathan, they told me, and I've worked with a lot of people with ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease, and 100% of the times, the people that went the medical route, at least from my experience, the doctors told me it was one of the worst cases they ever seen. Did they tell you that as well?
Actually, it was after my surgery that my surgeon, after taking out my colon and looking at it, he told me he's done hundreds of these operations and examined these colons on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the worst, that mine was a 9, and that if I had any doubts about whether or not I needed the surgery, those doubts should be put aside, and I should realize that I actually needed it.
Yes. Okay. So they made you feel better about getting it, in other words.
Yeah, because I kind of told him I was always wondering whether or not there was another route from surgery, because it was the last resort for me. There were very little options left. Everything else wasn't really working. Even medications that had traditionally put me into remission weren't working anymore either. And they put me on immunosuppressive type medications, and they worked temporarily. Once again, after a period of time, that would fail as well. Um, so it was very limited options, and surgery just kept looking like more and more of the main option left for me.
Okay. When you made this decision to do the surgery, and basically the surgery is they cut out a piece of your colon that was inflamed, correct?
They actually cut out the entire colon, and they cut out your rectum as well.
Okay. So when you
Yeah.
made the decision to do the surgery, how old were you?
I was diagnosed at 25, so I must have been about 26.
Okay. And prior to doing that, you said you tried everything else. Now, I know you briefly tried going on the natural diet and stuff. And at the same time, were you taking the medications or were they separate times?
I think I was still taking the medications, but to be completely honest, I remember that I didn't have the best insurance. I was a student to be able to take the medications exactly as prescribed, or I would take medications as prescribed. So if I was supposed to take 3 pills a day, 3 times a day, which would be 9 pills a day, I would take them. And then when it started getting low, sometimes I would cut down 6 or 7 pills. I also blame myself for that I wasn't compliant. I didn't follow the exact orders. Maybe that's why this was happening to me and it kept coming back. So I was sort of always trying to reason why the disease kept coming back. And you get to a point where sometimes you blame yourself. And I definitely did that and beat myself up for a while. I had to kind of come to terms with, in my case, most likely it just was not going to go away and the medications weren't going to help, most likely, even if I take the correct dosage.
Okay. So when you were trying to do this, what was the reaction? Now, briefly, you tried to do it naturally. I remember I told you a couple of things I have done, and I know you briefly tried it. What was the reaction from your parents and other people when you told them you were going to try doing this the natural way?
Uh, I don't even know how to put it in words. I had very little, if any, support growing up in a pretty busy household, where everyone really liked to eat and to go out to eat. And here I am saying, I don't want to eat what you're eating anymore, or I don't want to drink what you're drinking anymore. And this is what I want to have instead. And your environment and the social pressures around you to conform to what everyone else is doing, especially at an age of 25 or 26, are enormous. And if you have no support system, you kind of have all, the odds are like stacked against you. It was almost like, are you going to do this temporarily? And if you get better, then you'll go back to the other diet, what everyone else is eating. Are you saying you're never going to have pizza again or chicken parmesan again? You're never going to eat any of this stuff ever again? What kind of life are you going to have? You'll be miserable. How could you live without these types of foods? I mean, that was mostly the reaction that I had. But as sick as I was, there was at least some support to at least say, hey, try it. I remember even speaking with a doctor who did believe in the natural method. I had one phone consultation with him, and I think my parents paid for that, which they were begrudgingly paying for it because they felt he wasn't going to help me either, and that really nothing was going to help me. But there's a lot of blame. That's probably one of the worst things about being sick, whether it's IBD, Crohn's colitis, or any other illness. But a lot of people say, you did this to yourself. You ate something. That's why you have what you have. You caused this. Um, really no known answers or anything like that. So it's the enormous amount of guilt and self-blame comes into play. And it doesn't help when you're trying to get better. All you want to do is get better, and everyone around you wants you to get better too, but they don't support you in the right way. So answering your question, very little support, very little help, very little resources to try to actually do things the way at the time that you were even trying to tell me to do. And even then, it wasn't correct. Juicing and having raw fruits and vegetables is what you had mentioned, and what I think most people try to do when they get into health. And I was drinking Gatorade instead of having uh, things I would have had that were worse options, probably like whatever I had found in the house, which might have been soda or water that I would add with like maybe a little bit of iced tea, which was all pure sugar, like powdered sugar. And so to me, like, okay, let me have Gatorade because I'm running to the bathroom like 20 times a day. And the doctor says you should replace vitamins and minerals, and Gatorade has that, a sports drink. So let me do that. They're not raw fruits and vegetables. And then when I told my gastroenterologist, I was going to try something a little bit different and talked about juicing and raw fruits and vegetables. He said that if there was something I wanted to try, that I had to try it when I was well, not when I was sick or my intestines would become severely inflamed more so. So I kind of really didn't know exactly what I was doing. Again, 25, 26, but I was grasping at straws to try anything, trying to drink Gatorade to replace any electrolytes I was losing, um, and not really getting any support. And then wanting to try to have some sort of fruits and vegetables, but being told I'm gonna basically make myself worse and be hospitalized if I eat that. So there was a lot of conflicting information. There was no real, this is what you should need to do. This was the right thing for you. I just found myself being hospitalized repeatedly.
Sure. And I remember at the time, you told me you called up that guy, the natural guy, and I knew who it was. I know exactly who it was. And you said he wanted to charge me money to talk to him. And I always think at the time was like, well, the doctors charge you money too. It's just going through your insurance, but they're still charging you also.
Mhm.
And but your parents, you said, were support giving you the money or paid for that consultation with that guy. But I guess they had no problem going through the medical route because insurance covered it, so they didn't care about the money from that standpoint. Oh no, you said you didn't have good insurance at the time, but you had money for
I
surgery.
didn't,
What do you
didn't
mean?
have good insurance. It was kind of a bit of a long story, but I was a student, so I had whatever insurance students give you as a student for the school. Not expecting that a student would get as sick as I did and have repeated hospitalizations. And then thinking about having a surgery, I already knew this is probably going to be $1,000, maybe more, for the entire time in the hospital and the surgery. And so I actually met with social workers, and I found they helped me to get on like emergency Medicaid, where you don't really have to pay for anything. Otherwise, I would have had the surgery and it would have been covered partially, but there would have been this great out-of-pocket expense, and that would have been probably more to my family than me because I was still taking loans and going to school. Yeah, my parents helped pay for sometimes medication that there wasn't coverage for. I mean, again, these are all issues, making
Sure.
me feel guilty for making them pay for it, and then partially blaming me, for having to pay extra expenses for something that I'm sick with, I couldn't really help, but that they believed I was causing to myself by what I was either eating or drinking. Um, I have to say that was definitely the worst part of the whole ordeal, is the psychological component that most people don't think about.
Now, don't you find it interesting knowing what we know now that back then and even today, there are people, family and social workers and everyone willing to try to get you money or try so you can get to surgery and do what the doctors are saying. But if you want to go natural means, everyone's like, well, I don't know about that. You know, it's we can't pay for that or
There's
get you
very,
money for that.
very little support, and actually, the natural way, you know, when you go to a store and you want to eat healthy and have, salads and fruits and vegetables, it's actually cheaper to go to McDonald's and pay $1 for a cheeseburger than to get lettuce, tomatoes, and different things that you want to put cucumbers in a salad. You can spend $8, $9 for a salad for lunch, but you can go to McDonald's and get a cheeseburger for $1. So sometimes, money is definitely a motivational factor. In the long run, it is probably cheaper to be able to eat things that grow on trees or in the ground, and animals and whatnot. But sometimes people will also find a cheap way to get fast food, as we call it, quickly and cheaply, and just satisfy that urge, of hunger that they have. Whole different story though, because
Yeah.
I
So
don't know why I got IBD, and nobody knows why anyone gets inflammatory bowel disease. For a while, I thought it had to do with me being Jewish because I kept on hearing that it was a Jewish disease. But after so many years have passed, it's not, because people of all different cultures, backgrounds, and races are being diagnosed with inflammatory bowel disease now.
well, I know we have generic weaknesses, and some people get affected in different ways with different things. And we do. I mean, I know, and I talk about on this program why people suffer from inflammation in the body in different parts. But yes, there is no known medical cure or medical reason why people are getting this. There's just a lot of studies that are still being done many years after you and I have suffered from it. They're still doing studies years after. They're still doing studies on cancer with millions of dollars of research. They could send man to the moon, but they can't find out these cures to these things, and they're still doing these things. But so getting back to your case, so you didn't have the support or the knowledge of how to do this naturally. And so you felt, I don't want to say pressured, but the doctors made it seem, and everyone made it seem like your best choice for the situation you were in at that time was to do the surgery, right?
Yes, when I got to the end result of medications had failed, being hospitalized more than 5 times in a year, being on steroids off and on to a point that your face um, blows up and you get something called Cushing syndrome, where you kind of look like you've gained about 20 pounds and everyone thinks you've been gaining weight when it's really just all steroids. Your sugar levels in your body can make you almost like a diabetic from being on the steroids. All of these things failed. And then I had mentioned earlier, I was on immunosuppressants, which a lot of people with ulcerative colitis or Crohn's will go on. And the immunosuppressants caused me to get pneumonia because it was suppressing my own immune system from fighting an infection. I ended up getting an infection in my lung, and the infection was a pretty serious infection. It actually went outside of my lung and started going to one of my ribs, so it was on bone. Then I had to have infectious disease doctors take a look at me in the hospital, and they presented me, as if I recall correctly, as one of the cases of the week in their presentation. Every team of hospitals and doctors in the hospitals will have certain patients that they'll present to rounds or to a board of doctors. What do we do with this guy? So I was presented because I had a very complicated case of ulcerative colitis that then caused me to have pneumonia that had gone out of my lung to my rib. There was a doctor that wanted to remove one of my ribs. I remember the conversation. The infectious disease doctor came in, said, "We're not going to do that. We'll just put him on antibiotics for a while." And then the gastroenterologist or the colorectal surgeon came in and said, "I think we have had enough of all this stuff that's happening to you. I think your best answer here is surgery. Your colon and rectum are causing all these other problems in your entire body. Now you have an infection in your lung. It's time to take the colon and rectum out and be done with everything. We had a meeting about you. We discussed it. Everyone has agreed that that's the best answer for you." Um, so I had very little options left, laying in a hospital bed, and everything was failing me. You know,
Sure. Well, so now, so what happened? So, like, what was the difference you knew right away? Were you better right away? Did you feel better immediately from the colitis? And I know there's obviously you got to heal from the surgery, but right away, were you able to eat something that before you weren't able to eat? How was it right after the surgery, and how did progress over the years to where you are today?
So immediately after the surgery, you are like a newborn or a child again, in the sense that the first surgery that they do, they divert all of your digestion into sometimes an ostomy or a bag. And so I had that for 3 months, which again, a very intense mental battle ensues when you have an appliance hanging off your body that you've never had, that you're not born with, that you think only older people should have maybe something like that, or someone that maybe has cancer. And I'm 25 years old, and now I have an appliance hanging off of my waist. So it's extremely depressing to deal with. And I had all this, anything that I eat, and food and digestion was now being diverted to the bag. So I no longer had the worries about running to the bathroom 20 times a day or seeing blood, which happens with colitis. I didn't really have pain anymore, but I had to get used to a new body and a new way of things being processed through me that was not easy, mentally and physically. And then after a period of time, I had the second surgery when they removed the bag and kind of reconnect what's left of your small bowel, and they make a new rectum, a neorectum, out of your small bowel. And so this is the part about feeling like infancy again, when you actually have to start going to the bathroom again for the first time after having surgery like this. It actually feels as though parts of your body are on fire. And so that was something that I had to get used to as well. And sometimes I even had to watch what I ate, eat certain foods or chew very slowly. Um, Sometimes even use certain creams or certain medications to stop this feeling of fire that would happen pretty frequently. So I would say it took at least 6 months, at least, after my surgery to be able to start feeling as though I could eat some of the things I was eating before that, and then maybe another 6 months, or at least a good year, until I would actually um, be a little bit more symptom free and eat things and realize, wow, I can eat this. I'm actually okay. I'm not getting pain anymore. I'm not bleeding anymore. But there's definitely one significant difference between you and I, the fact that I've had the surgery and you've been cured more naturally. And it's gonna, for the rest of my life. I'm still going to the bathroom about 5, 6 times a day, every single day since the surgery, because I don't have a colon and a rectum. So my gastrointestinal tract has been shortened. So the time it takes for food to go through me is shorter. And so that's something that's different. That's something I have to get used to. If you were to go in a car and take a ride for 3 hours, you probably don't have to stop. I probably do. In the middle of the night, you might sleep 8 hours straight and never have to wake up in the middle of the night. I do. So those things are with me now. They're from the illness, they're from the surgery, and they'll be with me probably forever. So those things, I kind of think of it as a trade-off. I'm not sick anymore. I'm not running to the bathroom 20 times anymore. I'm not bleeding anymore. However, I have to wake up in the middle of the night. I have to excuse myself from work a couple times a day, still bathroom. It's just I have control now. When you have ulcerative colitis, as you know, you have no control. You feel like you have to run to the bathroom and you have like seconds to make it there. And I don't have that anymore. I have control. But it's distracting, and sometimes it still interrupts my life in ways that it probably doesn't for you, you know?
Sure, sure. Wow. And some people, some people say to me, well, my thing is like, I'm limited in what I could eat. Like my dad says, when are you going to start eating some real food? And I'm like, what's real food? Like junk food and fast food? And yeah, if I ate that food, I'd probably get sick. So I really have to be careful with what I eat. And this is one of the reasons that motivates me to be so strict in the way I eat. Some people look at that as a bad thing. They're like, well, I could eat whatever I want. I'm like, so, I mean, I don't want to eat bad food anyway. So, like, I'm using it. I'm looking at the good side of it, because you can look at everything as one of two ways. Yeah, I'm restricted to what I can eat, but so what? I'm helping myself. But there are people that are watching this, and a lot of them are dealing with it right now. And I help a lot of people with this, and they have to make that decision. And I tell them, I say, look, you can choose both ways. The natural way takes longer, and you have to limit what you're eating, and it's not easy. You got to be patient, because sometimes it could take months, maybe even years, to get completely healed. But when you do it the way you chose, immediately you're better from colitis. Yes, you have these other issues, but immediately you don't have this issue anymore. And so people have to make that choice. And that's why I wanted to have you on here, because The good news is it's over 15 or 20 years later, and you don't have any issues with it. And so it is an option for people that, I want people to know that even if you decide that way, you could still live a successful life. This isn't the end of your life if you have this, people. Your life is not over. And I want you to understand, whichever way you choose, just the options you had, something that you and I really didn't have available back then. And it wasn't that long ago, but still long enough ago where we didn't have as much knowledge about both ways, and doctors didn't have enough knowledge. Now there's like websites, and it's become very well known, and it's more of a common illness out there today.
It's something important probably to point out is that when I was going to actually have my surgery, for anyone out there who was actually considering this, I made sure that I met with 3 different surgeons, and they all had different techniques. So for anyone who may be watching that may be as concerned as I was of both the appliance, the ostomy, or the bag that some people have to have temporarily, which for me was 3 months, and also the scarring. There are some surgeons that will basically make an incision in the middle of your abdomen and go all the way down, and people are afraid and concerned of having that type of incision where your abdomen is just sort of like opened up. It's not the type of surgery that I had. I actually chose a specialist in laparoscopic surgery. So that's where they make about 4 or 5 incisions, and they really no more than about an inch. And there is no long incision down your abdomen. There's just smaller 5 or 6 incisions. And they take your colon out that way through these small, tiny holes, very minimal scarring. Healing time is a little bit quicker. No one really actually has to know what was done to you, because when you put on, let's just say, a bathing suit, you're not wearing a shirt for man, let's say in the summertime, no one can actually see that you've had this surgery because your bathing suit covers most of the scars because they're pretty low down. So for anyone who may be concerned about that type of scarring or ostomies, that sort of is what I went through, and I found someone who was a specialist to do things that way. Another thing that's interesting to point out is that I will never forget this. After my surgery was over, probably was just the next day that I was laying in the hospital, um, there was a physician from Singapore. There was a few. There was a physician from Singapore that came in the room. He actually had been following the colorectal surgeon that I had. They came from Singapore. Actually learned from him how to do this laparoscopic technique. And I was laying there. I was, pretty depressed. I just had surgery and I knew that I wasn't going to have colitis anymore, but I wasn't expecting him to come in and say this to me. And he extended his hand, shook my hand, and said, "Congratulations." I never felt worse. I just had surgery. I felt awful, tired, sick. I couldn't understand why this guy was congratulating me. He said to me, "You don't have ulcerative colitis anymore. You've been cured." I never thought of it like that. I just had surgery, and this guy's telling me I'm instantly cured. I don't have this sickness anymore. It's instant, but as you said, exactly what you just said. I didn't want to go this route. I didn't want to have surgery. I don't want to have to be using the bathroom as frequently as I still do today. Make a pouch, a fake rectum. I didn't want to have pouchitis, which I've had a couple times as a complication since surgery. But I never thought about it that way, that someone said to me immediately after surgery, "You're cured." Your situation, you are also cured. No one actually came over to you and shook your hand. You'd be better off patting yourself on the back, because this was something that you actually did for yourself. I had surgeons do this for me and cure me. And what you've done for yourself, by yourself, and it's worked. And there's never been an official day you can tell yourself, "I've been cured," because in your case, it was a transition period. It took a certain amount of time to just be free of inflammation and free of sickness and disease. That's different too. Like you said, what you've chosen is a longer process, has to have more patience, and there's no exact moment someone can say you're cured, which I had. Yours was just something that you kind of did, and it worked. And it's I hopefully worked for a lot of other people. You don't realize that there may be a moment in your life where you're not sick anymore, and you're actually thinking, "Wow, I'm cured." Because I think your mindset is always, it's going to come back. It's come back so many times. It's going to come back again. And maybe after a few years of you finally not being sick anymore, you might have told yourself, "I think I'm cured. I think I'm done." And I really never had that feeling until that man shook my hand and said, "You're cured." And I realized, I guess I am, but your case, it's different. You know, for anyone doing what you're doing, you're not going to have that day. No one's going to tell you you're cured. It's just something you're going to gradually probably be feeling better over the course of time.
Well, it's very interesting you say that. And I do have to say, I work with a lot of people that have inflammatory bowel disease. And I have to be honest, I was talking to somebody about it that I was working with just a couple of months ago. To this day, when I drink a lot of juice. I love juicing. And it sounds funny, but it's a serious thing. I'm so psychologically messed up, and you might be as well. I drink beet juice. And I kid you not, when I drink beet juice and I go to the bathroom, sometimes it comes out red.
Right.
And I get that feeling like, oh my gosh, is it back? And it's like, it's not a good feeling. And I'm like, and then I made a video about it. Am I cured or in remission? And I have a whole video about this online because some people say, oh, you're just in remission. You're not truly cured. And some people say you're cured. I said, look, whatever you want to call it, I don't have it. I don't have the symptoms, and I'm doing fine. And I believe why, and I help people with this. And it's a choice we have to make. But I want to say two things. Number one is, I help a lot of people with inflammatory bowel disease. That's why I'm doing this special here, this program package deal. And I help a lot of people with it. And you're the reason why, man. You were my best friend growing up. Folks,
Yeah.
my best friend got inflammatory bowel disease. And I did this. And I know what the doctors told him and did to him. And the other thing I wanted to say was, I'm sorry. I want to publicly apologize to you because I didn't have enough information and to give you the support you needed at the time and the knowledge at the time to even try doing this the way I would now. Like if somebody like you came to me now, like people do, I know exactly what to tell them and how to help them and emotionally how to deal with it. And I'm sorry, man, because at the time I didn't have that information and I failed you because you couldn't even give it an honest chance. But you're the reason, folks. This man's the reason why I do this for a living and my passion for this. And of course, because I had it, I don't want to see people suffer, but because of what happened with you. So all of you that are watching that have chosen a natural path and are getting better, you have this man to thank and it's just interesting how God put us, we grew up like literally living right next to each other and we both suffer from the same things. And I used to think, did we eat something one day in your house that was
I thought
bad?
the same thing. I used to think, what did we do? What did we eat? Or was it the water that we drank in the same building that we
But
lived
our
in?
families, our brothers and sisters didn't get it, but it was me and him. We hung out all the time.
Yeah.
It was like, it's just crazy. And so, from that standpoint, we don't know. There is no known cause of it from that standpoint. And, but we did eat a similar diet, but so did our brothers and sisters. They ate a similar diet and they just didn't get it. So, but I do want to let people know that whether you choose the path I took or choose the surgery, you can still have a life. And that's what people need to know. And so I
appreciate, by the way, the apology. It's not necessary. Like, I don't think you did anything wrong. I think you did. I heard this on the Oprah Winfrey show one time, and it stuck with me, even in the book that I had written, which was, she said on TV one time, you did then what you knew how to do, and when you knew better, you did better. And so that's really all you did. You were doing then what you knew, and maybe you know a lot more now, which makes sense. It's been 20 years, and the same for me. And given the circumstances I had living in the household that I was in, I don't know that anything could have been any different, because the pressure around me to conform to what was being consumed in my house was enormous. It was like the walls closing in. And even for the couple of days, maybe a week, I did try eating exactly what that doctor told me on the phone, which was extremely limited. And my mother actually did make what he asked me to eat, and I had that and only that for several days. And I would say I felt a little better, like just a little bit, but I remember like just a couple weeks later, I was back in the hospital again. So it was kind of like, it just wasn't really working for me for whatever reason. And maybe my gastroenterologist had it right, that when I finally reached a period of remission, whether it was through medication or diet or whatnot, maybe that's the time to start trying small changes and to get really healthy and maybe try totally changing my diet. But when you're sick, to try to make changes, it's impossible. You just can't. Your body's in a state of chaos and inflammation. And it's like, it's almost kind of like, if you got hit in the face and you had the bruise and you were all swollen, it makes sense to put ice on it to shrink the swelling. It makes sense to give steroids when you're all inflamed inside. So that's what doctors do, and it makes sense to do that. Does it make sense to put foreign things in your body that you've never tried all of a sudden in the middle of having inflammation and swelling? But it does make sense to maybe make those changes when you're feeling well and see how you adapt to them. And another thing is food diary. I can't stress how important that might be when you're making small dietary changes to write them down. So if there's a reaction, you can see what it's from and what you did. Because there was a couple of times I distinctly remember having a flare up immediately after eating or drinking a certain thing. So I remember one time for me, it was ice cream cake. Next day, I was bleeding and sick right after having ice cream cake the night before. So perhaps there's a connection or a correlation there. But it's very helpful to keep a food diary when you're going to try to make any change if someone's going to try and really do this, what you do.
Sure. And I had a lot of pressure as well. And this is what a lot of people deal with. A lot of people are young, they're living at home, and they have to deal with their family. So I'm glad you spoke about that. For me, I don't know if you knew, but because when I was dealing with it, you had went away with school and we lost touch for a little while. And then when you finally came to me and told me you had it, I'm like, not only did I have it, I knew what it was and I was very familiar with it. And that's when I first expressed to you, well, this is what I did. But when I was going through it, my pressure, and we're all in different situations, I was like newly married and I was losing all this weight. And it was my ex-wife, and she was telling me how skinny I looked and how terrible I looked. So I was dealing from that standpoint, the physical appearance part of it. Yeah. And it was just the stress from that was making me feel worse and worse and worse. And I tried the medicine by the doctors. I tried the steroids and everything else, and it would get me out of my inflammatory stage. And then she would say, now you can eat whatever you want. I would eat whatever I wanted. And then I got sick again, and it kept going back and forth. And just by the blessing it was, I ended up moving here to Florida and moving next to this place, Hippocrates Health Institute, where they told me about people that have got cured from this through the diet and stuff. And I was like, wow. And I made these changes and it worked. But, there's so many different areas. And that's what I tell everybody that's watching now. It's not just the physical thing. A lot of it is the social pressure and the family and the situations, but
absolutely
got to deal with it. That's one of the things that makes the inflammation worse to begin with. It's just the nerves from it and dealing with that. So you gotta think positive and just look for the best answer possible, not just from what's best to eat or not eat or to avoid eating or what surgery is best. But when you say you got to do everything, folks, you got to do everything. And that means you're working on mental and your emotions as well. And that will make a big difference. But I'm glad we're both here today. I'm here, you're here, and neither of us are suffering from inflammatory bowel disease.
Yeah. Now we're suffering from other things.
Yes. But that happens. And, but yeah, it's a, folks, anybody that's watching, look at the other videos I'm doing here and see the other people I've interviewed. This works. And it's like we said, it's been over 20 years now. And a lot of people have been they're doing this, and it's all the choice you make. And but I definitely think you would agree with me that surgery should be a last resort. Somebody should try everything before doing that. Would you agree with that?
It was, yeah, absolutely. It was a last resort for me. That's not something anyone wants. And the moment they come for you with a stretcher and ask you to go on it and start wheeling you toward the operating room, ever had a surgery, it's the most intense, one of the scariest moments you'll have in your life. And you're not thinking about how you'll get better and cured. You're wondering if you're going to come out of it and just be okay. But we've both come through it with two different paths, and I think you changed your life enormously. I mean, you literally left the state, moved to another state, changed even your job, like everything. I've changed some things. I am more careful now, even though I've had surgery and I can technically eat whatever I want, so they say, but I don't live the same type of lifestyle that I may have lived if I didn't have the surgery. I'm not one to really drink alcohol very much, socially once in a while, but I realize now that the reason why people who become intoxicated often end up vomiting is because alcohol is a poison. It's a toxin to your body, and so your body does what it can to get rid of it and causes you to throw up. So your digestive tract does the same thing. When there's something in it that it doesn't want, it wants it out. So we have to pay attention to all these signals that our body gives us, and I'm much more self-aware of those now. So I'm a little bit more cautious and careful with things that I eat and drink. And I feel that exercise is also, very important. Breathing is important. And taking care of yourself mentally is at least as important as physically.
Yes, and one thing we were talking about the emotional aspect of this, and we don't got to get too personal, but I feel when you're teaching somebody how to get better from something, like I am with this program, is somebody who's dealt with it. Like I deal with people that have overcome cancer. Those are the people I want teaching other people because they know the emotional aspect of it. And with ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease, like there's no warning when you got to go to the bathroom. And you got to make sure you're always around the bathroom. And you and I had spoken on personal levels about our worst situations and stories that we could sometimes even almost laugh about now. But when you're
Yeah.
going through it, it's like the worst experience in our lives.
Yeah.
And I know many of you watching this are going through those experiences right now. And I just want you to know that I understand what you're going through because I lived it. And it's not a good feeling. And it's a very personal thing. And it's things you can't even talk about. And I just remember like a lot of these stories. So, this is why I'm doing this, man, because it's just not a physical disease. It's so much more. And people tell me I look skinny, your parents telling you whatever they were telling you, and then the fact you just got to go to the bathroom and always be near a bathroom and nobody knows like why and stuff, and it's something people don't feel
Yeah.
good talking about. So it's a
Yeah.
tough thing. It's tough.
After my, I think it was second hospitalization, I started walking around. I had an IV pole attached to my arm, and just kind of strolling around the hospital. And I remember I looked out the window. I was in Manhattan, and I just saw people walking around. And I remember having the thought in my head, I just want to walk around. I just want to walk around too. You take the slightest things for granted that we do every day. When you can't do them, that's when it's a realization. So it's kind of something you have to think about every day, what you're able to do that we couldn't do before. And like you said, that there's a lot of people probably watching right now that maybe can't even leave the house because sometimes that's how bad this type of illness gets. You can't even leave home.
Well, it has become more common today, and more well known today. I even see commercials on TV for drugs, like before videos on YouTube, drugs that they're giving for ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. So it's become common, and I think that's good and bad. It's good there's more awareness about it, but it's bad because there's more misinformation about it as well, and
Yeah.
people have more choices, but that's not always a good thing. So that's why I'm doing this, and I appreciate you taking the time to speak to me, and then hopefully helping and inspiring more people to just know that they have choices that do
Uh,
work. Because me and you
I,
have
I agree. I've seen commercials lately on TV for ulcerative colitis that I've never seen before. And I used to always say, anything that has to do with the digestive tract, most people won't speak about. You can go on a bus or a train, and everyone around you, if they're talking about health, will talk about hypertension, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, lipid levels, as if, you're just talking about the news. But once you mention even just acid reflux, stomach aches, diarrhea, constipation, nobody wants to talk about this at all. Embarrassing. And now there are commercials about it on TV. So it's nice that we're finally able to talk about things openly that we couldn't before. But I agree with you that information out there is still not 100%, um, forthright with how things um, could be perceived by people watching these commercials. They're not really addressing um, how it might happen, how diet may play a role. We still don't know the cause, but what kinds of people are getting it, things like that. And also what the options that you have, that one person has, not just medications. Live your life.
absolutely, absolutely. And I just changed the view. I should have did this the whole time. So we're gonna have to do this interview over again. No, I'm just kidding. So, but wow, I should have done that earlier. But anyway, it's that's where we're at, folks. And this is my friend Jonathan, and I hope you got some good information about this. And put some comments and questions below, and we'll answer them. And thank you for watching, everybody. Do you have anything you want to say before we finish, John?
Just to anyone out there who's suffering, I hope that they don't suffer in silence like most people do when they're sick. They kind of keep to themselves. There are a lot of resources out there. We actually didn't mention them on this call here, but for those who are now watching this on the internet, there are multiple websites. There are support groups for people that have Crohn's and colitis. There is the Crohn's and Colitis, I think, Foundation of America, the CCFA. There's a lot of resources out there to at least get more knowledge and find people that are suffering the same way you are, so that you don't have to feel alone. And I would definitely try to reach out. I did that when I was sick, and I would highly recommend that anyone suffering does the same and not be alone. I didn't even know you were living in the same building and had the same thing, so that took a while to find out. So just imagine how many people out there might even have just their neighbor suffering from the same thing and they don't know. So
Yeah. Well, one thing is I did go to the Ulcerative Colitis Foundation back then, and they were not very supportive of the natural diet and lifestyle and what I was experiencing. And I tried to share my testimony with them back then. And I don't know anything what's going on with them now, but back then they weren't open to even hearing about there's a possible cure or answer through diet. And they didn't treat me very kindly when I was trying to tell them, please let me just tell people what my experience, and they wouldn't want me to share it back then. So we just gotta be careful and be aware and look at all the resources out there, folks. And there's a lot of information out there now. So on the internet. So choose wisely, and I pray everyone will use this information to help them. So thank you, John, and thank you everybody for watching.
Nature's wealth, good for your health. This is the Raw Life Health Show. Raw Life, brighten up your life.